That way, at least if my computer freezes, it's going, it's recording, and people can start coming in.
All right, I
All
see
right, now we got
participants
people.
coming in.
Okay, I don't know what my computer is doing. We should be good. I will go off camera and monitor, and this will be all your all show. All right. Ooh.
All right.
All right,
Hi,
thanks.
everyone. All right.
Hi.
Dylan, whose drawings are these?
These ones back here?
Yeah.
Oh, these are my kids' drawings,
Oh, that's great. I love
not mine,
that.
but they are fun. Yeah, these are like collaborations. These ones here between my wife and my daughter.
Love it.
Yeah.
Hello, Lisette. Happy that you can be here too. Welcome, welcome. We'll just give a couple minutes for people to filter on in.
Alrighty.
How's your day going so far, Dylan?
Pretty good so far.
All right. Folks, feel free to use the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. We'd love to know.
I might not be able to see the chat during the presentation, but
Oh, that's okay. I'll relay any important bits over to you.
all right, cool.
Right, we're close to 20 folks in this room. Awesome. Coming from Cali, Wisconsin, New Mexico. Wow. All the time zones. I'm based in Montreal, Canada, so we got East Coast covered as well.
Everywhere.
Hey, from Philly, Demetrius, hello. Washington, awesome. Coast to coast, really. Another one from California. Hey, y'all. All right. Well, I think we can go ahead and get our intro started. Hello, everyone. Welcome, everyone, to our AVG Pre-Apprenticeship Speaker Series. We're so glad that you could join us. For those of you who may not be familiar, this speaker series is from the BRIC Foundation, which aims to provide early awareness and education about all the wonderful careers that exist across animation, visual effects, and gaming. My name is Sarah. I'm BRIC's Director of Communications, and I'll also be your moderator for today. And again, for those who may not know BRIC, we are a nonprofit organization dedicated to increasing representation in entertainment, gaming, media, and tech. We have tons of resources, including this speaker series that you're tuned into, so be sure to check us out after this is over. Today, we have such an exciting presentation all about modeling for animation by industry pro Dylan Ekren here, followed by an audience Q&A towards the end of the session. So be sure to use that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to submit any questions you may have along the way. Dylan is a character modeler who has over 10 years of feature animation experience and has worked for studios like Disney, Paramount, and Netflix. He's always loved to make characters, whether drawing or sculpting them, and he loves learning and talking about the craft. So Dylan, I'll let you take it away from here.
Okay. Hello. Well, that's like the first 5 slides that I have, so now I don't have to do those ones.
We love a good intro, though. We love a
Yeah.
good backstory.
Great. Well, I do have that, so we'll get into that. Hi. Well, yeah. Thanks for coming. I'll go ahead and start my slideshow now, and we can talk. So I'm gonna share my screen. So that should be shared now, and then I'm gonna start this. So you should be able to see this now. All right. Yeah. So hey, thanks for coming. Thanks to BRIC for inviting me to do this. But yeah, my name is Dylan, and I'm going to talk about modeling for animation and for other stuff also. So let's go ahead and get into that. So yeah, I'm extremely qualified to give this presentation, as you can see by this slide. I'm just realized I'm wearing the same hat in that one. So yeah, I've been doing this for over 10 years now, working as a character modeler in feature animation. I started so I went to college in Colorado, art college, and then I moved out to LA and I did a little bit of school out here, and I freelanced around actually as an illustrator for quite a while, before finally getting a position in the talent development program at Disney. And so from there, I stayed at Disney. I got through that program and I stayed there for like 9 years. And then I left and I went to Netflix for a little while and worked on a TV show there. And then came back to Disney for Wish. And then now I'm off. I'm at another place called Paper Games, which is another company that's making a feature here in the US. They're originally a Chinese company. So kind of been all over the place doing different things. I've worked in like several different aspects of this. So yeah, hopefully the slideshow will be kind of interesting, and we'll talk a little bit. And if you don't know anything at all about modeling, don't worry. I'm gonna start from the very, very basics. Probably most people know something about it. So yeah, I'm also a teacher. I teach character sculpting classes, and I'm a mentor at CG Spectrum, things like that. So I really like to talk about what this is, and I love to look at art and talk about the craft and all that stuff. So it's a lot of fun for me. All right, so what is a model? It's basically at its most simple, it's just the arrangement of polygons in space, right? Which is made up of vertices, points, and edges, and then the faces that connect those things. So you can kind of see here. Probably most people know that that's, generally what it is. Common terms you may have heard on the streets referring to models is, things like polygons, polys, tris, quads, faces, verts, vertices, points, those types of things. Those are all like the vernacular of working in 3D. So, eventually the arrangement of these components, they become more and more complex. And seeing you're doing art, whoops. So, if we take a look, a lot of things start with like very, very basic, simple shapes like this cube. And then after a little while, and with a little bit of inspiration, we can make more and more complex things. We can build anything, right? So it's a complicated scene over here on the right, but it's all just made out of like really simple objects. So there's a certain degree of planning that goes into this kind of stuff, but it's cool. If you like to build things from nothing, or just like to construct stuff in general, if you ever had a house that was filled with too many Legos or drawings or things like that, then that's modeling is probably something you might enjoy, especially if there's a problem solving component there. We'll get into that. But yeah, modeling really it's kind of like a gateway to making art in 3D, right? Everything sort of starts with modeling anyway. All right, modeling tools. How do you do it? So a lot of tools, you may have heard of some of these things: Maya, ZBrush, Blender. Some of them are more specifically modeling tools. Some of them have a lot more jobs that they can sort of do. So there's very few like very dedicated modeling tools. Maybe something like ZBrush would be most like the closest to that, because it's pretty much just dealing with making models, making meshes. But things like Maya and Blender, there's a lot more that's incorporated into those things. So rendering, rigging, surfacing, all those kinds of things are done in those programs as well. I have a little video demo here. There's no sound to this, so I'm just going to talk. Not the most amazing thing ever, but this is just basically how something might get put together in Maya. Just taking polygons and using the tools in Maya to manipulate those, adding geometry, moving things around. It's very similar to drawing in a lot of ways, and it's very similar to building things, like I said, out of Legos. This is sped at 300%, which makes everything look slightly better than it probably, like it makes me look more, anytime you watch a time lapse of anybody working, they just look automatically like they know what they're doing. Like every decision is decisive and final. But this is just to illustrate that it's quick to put stuff together, and at its most basic, this is kind of what modeling is. So we probably don't have to watch this whole entire thing. I'll just kind of skip ahead a little bit here, but all of these like blue lines are representing faces on an object. There's all kinds of like really powerful tools in here that we can use to build stuff. And then pairing that sort of like technical knowledge with and artistic knowledge is what sort of makes a great modeler. And that's pretty much what it is at its most fundamental. There are, depending on the industry that you're in, it can branch out to different things. There's sometimes different jobs or different requirements of somebody who's doing building models, but we'll talk a little bit more about that, get kind of more specific here. You can see I'm running into some errors here already, like even on very simple stuff. Things like programs love to betray you at some point, and so you'll always kind of be fighting the technical aspects of making stuff while you're trying to be an artist. But that's, if you reframe it as an opportunity, then it's a good way to think about things. I'll just kind of skip ahead here. You kind of get the idea, right? So we're pulling things out. This is I don't know if this sound is going to work. Let's see if the sound works. Doesn't sound like it's going to work. That's okay. I don't know if you can hear that or not. But so this was a model that I got to work on for a show at Netflix. This is just kind of like an example of where modeling can go. If you do have like a design vernacular and you kind of understand how to use the programs to get what you want. There's like a robot character in this show that I was working on, and they had drawings of like what his hand looks like, and then he's supposed to have like a blaster that comes out of his hand. And they kind of had a general idea of what it should look like when it's done, but they didn't have any idea of how to get there. And so they, maybe foolishly let me take care of that. So I was able to just come into Maya and build something out that might work. So you'll kind of see here how it opens up and figures that out. But that kind of stuff is really fun for me, I think. It just feels like building Legos again as an adult. But yeah, it's just like very simple stuff. But I'm incorporating animation tools and deformations. All this is like cheating. A lot of those pieces are scaling and moving around. And that's exactly what happens when we get things into animation. So whatever makes the final product look good, but that kind of stuff is really fun for me to do. So I thought I would show that. This is not me, but you can see this is a really cool kind of time lapse of how you might put together an environment for games. I found this on ArtStation. You can see the artist in the top right there. I definitely give proper credit where it's due. But this is like, I just think that's such an amazing transformation. Like even, let's just go back to the beginning there. Just starting with like such a basic outline there, and then building things up very, very simply, and then adding layers and layers of complexity, including, so this is for games, or this would be like a real-time environment, which we'll talk about, but this would be like more than just modeling, right? So there's incorporating textures and lighting and foliage and all that stuff into the same thing. So, there's, depending on what your job is, what your role is, or even if you're just making art for yourself, there's a lot more things that can kind of plug into modeling, and you'll sort of understand what that like gateway analogy is here in a second. But I just thought that was really cool. This looks like a nice piece of concept art, but it's a model. All right, so this would be like more of a sculpting workflow. And again, this is not the most amazing sculpting ever, but I just wanted to kind of show. So in a sculpting workflow, you're more concerned with the shape of things and less concerned with the technical aspects of stuff. So if you are modeling like in Maya or Blender, polygon modeling, moving points around in space, you have to be a little bit more aware of where those points are going. Whereas working in something like ZBrush or a sculpting workflow, Blender can do this as well. You're more concerned with volumes and shapes and sort of getting that stuff to look right. And there's also, it's like a completely different way of working too. Like, for example, I just duplicated that object and now I am combining them together. There's like a way to dynamically combine things together. So you really aren't tripped up with the technical aspects of things as much while you're sculpting. And it's just kind of a different way to work. This is actually the same exact mesh, just a few minutes later. I skipped ahead because it was kind of boring, but I'm just using brushes. So like this is more of a brush-based workflow when you're sculpting. Brushes to kind of sculpt out some shapes within here. Again, this is sped way up, so nobody works this fast. And if I was smarter, I probably would have worked from like a concept instead of just free forming it in ZBrush, 16 hours ago for this presentation. But just kind of like pulling and pushing shapes around until they look good. And so one of the things I always emphasize when I'm teaching and just when I talk about any of this in general is learning how to be a designer and learning how to think in those kind of artistic terms, because it really does just improve everything that you do if you can make the decisions in your models from like a solid artistic basis and not just like what feels right or what looks good at the time. So this is just kind of an example of that. So yeah, just building up volumes, smoothing things out. I already made the analogy of modeling being similar to drawing. I really think it is. I wonder why it went backwards in time, back to those ears. That's kind of weird. Let me skip ahead. So, oh yeah, so here I'm just adding like some extra surface details and stuff like that. Hang on, cat's trying to bust into the rig here. Come on in, cat. Okay, come on. Cat, open the door. She doesn't move. All right, so yeah, just kind of like this is what I spend most of my time doing is just working in ZBrush and kind of blocking out shapes and doing stuff like that. So both for job stuff and just for fun. And then another kind of nice thing about, or like if you want to take your models a little bit further or your sculpts, adding color to things and sort of making a more final piece of art. So not everything is just kind of like dull and gray, which you probably saw from that Maya video. Just skip ahead a little bit here. It's getting a little long. But yeah, just kind of adding some simple color there really transforms things. Again, not that this is the world's most incredible model, but you kind of get the idea. We're using volumes and shapes as opposed to dealing so much with vertices and edges and things like that. Those things still exist in a sculpting workflow, but there's like so many of them that it almost feels not super important. So yeah, that's kind of like a typical ZBrush sculpting for fun type of thing. All right. This looks like the same slide. So this is some stuff I did for Disney. We'll just go ahead and skip that. So for Disney, I worked on Encanto. This is a character I worked on in Encanto. This would represent like early VisDev stage modeling. So at this point, we're still not totally concerned with the topology or any of the technical aspects. This is mostly just trying to take whatever the current like approved concept art would be and translate that into 3D. And I'll talk a little bit more about that also, but it's a fun character to work on. Probably one of my favorite characters to do. Let's go to the next one. So yeah, in a pipeline, which is just a word to describe sort of the downstream workflow of any production. So yeah, I mentioned before, like the dead gray look of that house model that I was doing in Maya. So as you can tell from that, there's usually a lot more stuff that needs to happen before a work of art, is complete. So other downstream processes exist, like surfacing or texturing, hair, cloth, rigging, animation, and all of these different departments or steps along that pipeline, they all rely on modeling to some degree. Even visual effects and layout, previs, things like that, they all sort of use modeling skills at times. And it's something that everyone's kind of aware of, right? So being at the beginning of a pipeline makes modeling functionally an extension of design, like we kind of showed with that last one. And that's because modeling is a way to make representative art in a very similar way to drawing. Is that super loud? There's a vacuum cleaner now going, because of course there's vacuum cleaner going.
No sounds on this end. You're good.
Oh, okay. Never mind then. All right. So here's kind of another way to visualize that, this workflow. So over here, we've got like in this orange box, this is pre-production, right? This is before anything gets into animation to be moving. And then everything moves downstream to production, and then eventually the final version of whatever it's going to be. And as we go along, the artwork sort of evolves also. So this was for Wreck-It Ralph. So yeah, modeling often is the bridge between design and production, or it's also, you know, it's the first step in production after pre-production. So here's an example. So that's Ralph. This is over here on the left, the VizDev model of Ralph kind of early on. So they've got the artwork, you know, at a certain point it's approved and they're moving on. So they start to move the characters into 3D to see how do these shapes work in 3D, you know, what works, what doesn't work, and what can be improved. The sooner that, you know, if you're making a 3D animated movie, the sooner you can get your character designs into 3D and start looking at them, the better, right? Kind of makes sense. So that would be like early on, and then they continue to iterate, and then at a certain point, the 3D version of it kind of becomes the new artwork, and then 2D artwork and stuff starts to reflect that. And then sort of both of those things move forward together. It's never, or it usually isn't like entirely driven by 2D art. At a certain point, the model becomes the art. So let's see. And then, yeah, as you can see, as we get from like, this is all just polygons, right? This middle one here, this is still just in the modeling phase. The hair and stuff, it's all sculpted out. But eventually those models, like the shape of the hair and the, you know, this is all trying to hit the designs. And then as they move downstream to other departments that are going to absorb that information, it, you know, like hair and cloth, those are totally different disciplines, but they use, in a lot of cases, the models that they're provided with as like a goal to try to hit, or, you know, you as a model, you're functionally carrying the design all the way through the pipeline is kind of what I'm trying to say. So, but yeah, the modeling is when the design becomes real and it gets turned into an asset. Anyway, hopefully that's making sense. I'm trying to not say the same thing over and over. So yeah, this is just simplify it down a little bit more, a simpler way of thinking about it. Typically, a modeler starts with a design and then they create it, you know, by hand in a 3D modeling program like Maya or ZBrush. And it's as much a technical skill as an artistic one. And a good modeler can think in design terms and apply that knowledge. So nobody wants to just be a button pusher, right? You want to make artistic decisions. Some people want to be a button pusher, but I don't think it's something to strive for. You want to be making artistic decisions and sort of be involved in that process, right? It feels good to do that. So this is like kind of another way that you could do it. I made this one. This is my legally distinct survival horror character. It's not based on any existing franchises at all. And the whole idea with this one was I had to come up with this design for something, and I was having a hard time figuring it out. So I jumped into ZBrush and did all my like basic shapes in ZBrush. I just sculpted this one on the left out real quick. And then I did like my final design over the top of it. So it can go both ways. And eventually I'll go back and do like a final version of this in 3D. And no one will ever know that I started in 3D, went to 2D, and then back to 3D. So those skills are all kind of interchangeable, and you'll jump around a lot, or you can. What do you need to know to be good at your job as a modeler? So there are three main points that I could think of. A comprehensive understanding, geez, go to school. A comprehensive understanding of modeling tools. You know, you need to be able to take the problem of how do I make this thing, and then figure out, you know, how you get there using the tools that you have available to you. Having design skills and a vocabulary for design, like knowing what straights and curves are in design language. There's all kinds of different things we can get into there. That's mostly what I talk about in my classes and stuff like that. But there's tons of resources for that. But yeah, knowing kind of like, if you're interpreting designs from somebody else, you need to be able to talk the same way that they do. And then finally, a deep understanding of how downstream departments use or rely on your work. So that's another efficiency trait, knowing how departments use your model and what they need to do with it will improve the speed with which you work, because you'll know exactly what you're trying to do. Deepens your knowledge because you're understanding what other departments have to do, and it'll make you lots of friends because they won't be upset with you if you give them trash. Let's talk about design and efficiency. So this guy on the left, All right here. Oh, you can't see my mouse. This guy on the left right here, he's talking about we only want to make the greatest characters possible, and they're going to have all the bells and whistles. I don't know why I chose that character. I was just thinking peak character design. Let's stuff it to the gills with quality. The other guy's saying the render farm is literally on fire. So depending on the pipeline that you're in, again, this is more of a games thing than it is feature film. Efficiency is a huge part of what you're going to be doing as a modeler, and it's always just like kind of good best practices anyway. But yeah, understanding how to implement the artistry of what you're doing in a way that's optimized for the pipeline that you're working in is what makes you an efficient artist. So efficiency versus effectiveness. Let's talk about effectiveness in design, at least. All right, you want to be an effective modeler. And it's more than just making something that other departments can use, because effectiveness is how close to the intended goal you can land with your work. So everyone remembers Sonic on the left as terrible, right? It makes you regret having eyes to see in some cases. But in a vacuum, if that just kind of existed out there and it wasn't tied to anything, it's probably fine. But the intended goal of this was to make Sonic, and he's a appealing, sympathetic cartoon hedgehog man. But it failed because it's not an effective design. But modeling and design are interlinked. Remember, they're kind of the same thing. So if they're not in sync, if they're not both working together, then they both fail. And so, in modeling, the effectiveness is not only how close you can get to the intended design, but also how well, it works for what you need it to do. I kind of already said that, I guess. If it's for animation, if you're working in animation, the technical aspects of your model need to work, right? It needs to be able to deform properly. It's got to have the right kind of topology. It needs to be built in a way that works for animation. If you're just making art, if you're just making sculptures or something for yourself, or just like a cool image, it doesn't really matter as long as it looks cool. So there's lots of different ways that you can go with this stuff. Here's a little bit more about efficiency. So efficiency is the ability to produce maximum output with minimal waste, which is kind of like a fun little game, I think, that you can do, or at least it is for me. I love to optimize things whenever possible. There's something kind of satisfying about like, oh, I can make something look visually the same, but it's way lighter on resources or something like that. And in a lot of cases, you'll have to do something like that. The example here, of course, all three of these spheres look exactly the same in their final version, which is this one. But then if we take a look at what's underneath the hood there, the actual topology there, that one on the left is very, very lightweight, right? It's not carrying a lot of polygons. The other two have significantly more, or they might be laid out differently. So if the end result is the same, then the way that you construct it makes a big difference. And that's what a lot of modeling is problem solving. So I looped this animation like 10 times, I think. Oh, okay, here we go. So here's another, this is an example I found on Twitter of just efficiency in general. So you can see the one on the left, 272 tries, the one on the right, 80 tries, but they are the same in the end. The end result is, you can't tell the difference, but one is like more than twice the other in terms of polygon budget. All right, limitless power and potential modeling. More than likely, the very first thing that you'll ever learn how to do in 3D. And that means that almost everyone has created some sort of polygonal monstrosity. It's a rite of passage. So these are all images that I found searching for my first 3D model. I'm not making fun of anybody here because everybody has one of these. It's mostly just to show that everyone can learn this stuff. And everyone who does 3D usually starts here with something basic, right? Something that you'll look back at later and go, that's the Sonic the Hedgehog of my modeling career. So from here, the interests branch. Specialization, is needed depending on the pipeline. People change, empires are built, dreams are crushed, love blossoms, but everyone that works in a 3D pipeline knows what modeling is and how to do it in theory, at the very least. Let's talk a little bit about high and low level modeling positions. So we've got our art director guy down here on the left. So that's what if you ever work with like an art director or work in a team with other people, that's a lot like what it's like. It's like, do these little changes, move it back, makes these other changes again. It's probably the most accurate GIF of working that I've ever found, but it's It's good. So modeling jobs, they might depend on the industry that you're in. The particulars of those jobs may be further informed by the studio or the team you work with. In film, specifically in animation, the pipeline is very segmented and specialized, which means everyone kind of has like one job that they do. So modelers mostly just model. Look artists mostly just do texturing or look. And so on. So in games or smaller productions, it's possible that a modeler might be responsible for more than just that. So they might be doing modeling and surfacing, or even modeling and rigging. Like at Pixar, at least for a while, I don't know if they still do, the modelers were also the riggers. So you kind of like immediately had to face the consequences of your decisions as a modeler, because then you had to make that model available for animation. So if something didn't work, you had to fix it. It's actually kind of like a good way to work. Quality check your own stuff. But some examples of modeling jobs, and maybe not like a full-time position, but things that you can do. Like starting top left, you've got scan, cleanup, and processing. So you do like 3D scans of stuff, and you might have to convert that into something that's usable in a pipeline. But there's automotive uses for modeling. Architecture is a huge one. Concept artists use modeling a lot more often. Now, when I was at Netflix, there wasn't a single 2D concept artist that didn't use Blender to build some assets out to draw over. Production artists, obviously, that's mostly what we're talking about. Higher end modeling jobs are typically on like the more artistic and creative side, and lower level jobs are more like technical, process oriented. But I've never been in a place where I didn't have to do some degree of both of those things. So it's good to know, sort of how to do those. This is a model I did for Netflix. This is kind of on the more creative side. So I had artwork to work from, but I was building this character in 3D, and then this character model was then shipped off to, let me just run that one again, shipped off to, well, now it doesn't want to work. Everything's frozen. PowerPoint's not responding. Good. Oh boy. Hang on, I might have to restart PowerPoint. Let me stop my share. I'm sorry about that. Although I don't know why I'm apologizing for PowerPoint. All right, we're gonna restart the program here.
PowerPoint couldn't handle the limitless power of
Good
modeling,
grief. Yeah, I guess limited power and potential is what it should say. I don't even know what's on the screen. Probably just my face. All right, let me go back. Screen. Sorry about that. I hardly ever make any kind of mistake. Let's see. Slideshow.
PowerPoint more like limited PowerPoint. Yes.
Yeah, that's
Nice
right.
one,
Take that, Bill Gates. All right. So remind me not to go backwards. I'll just loop these once, I guess. Oh, well, look at that. There's a little play button in the bottom of each of these. So anyway, where was I? This was going overseas to the production studio that was actually going to interpret this. So this is like another kind of weird job I never thought I would have, which is just making like cool models, and then somebody else had to do all the technical stuff for it. But because I've been on that side, the technical side, I wanted to make sure that everything I made was bulletproof for them. So that's what these were all for. These are all just sculpts that are done in ZBrush and Maya, colored in ZBrush like I had shown before. These are some of the most fun characters I've ever gotten to work on. Being at Netflix working on My Dad the Bounty Hunter, that was the most fun I've ever had working. Say that a lot. Another character from that. These were just fun to do and gave me a lot of like artistic freedom. But I had to know design stuff in order to fill in the gaps, because I would get like drawings that were just from one angle or they were kind of loose. And so I had to take what I was given and sort of extrapolate that information, which I was able to do because I've been doing this for a little while. Skip ahead. All right, this is just a cool robot arm that I found. And whenever I see stuff like this, it just makes me excited to make more stuff. And so I spend a lot of time just like scrolling through ArtStation or various portfolio sites and looking at what people make. I think finding that inspiration is important, but this is just another example of like a very high res model, something that would went into a game, Horizon. So it's just neat to look at. I don't know. if you're looking at this and you're like, I don't care about this, then maybe you're not a modeler. Let's talk about game and film pipelines, just kind of the general difference between them. So probably a lot of you already know, but on game side, it's all real-time rendering. So what you see is what you get for the most part. There's no kind of like post processing thing happening because you're usually like interacting with that environment, right? They're inherently interactive pipeline. With film, it's offline rendering, so there's a lot of post and things that go into doing that. You'll render out final frames, and then after that, there's color correction, or they might add additional elements in there. Editing, all this kind of stuff happens. Another major difference, you've got a lower kind of technical budget with games because this has to run on a PlayStation or it has to run on somebody's computer. So you can't just have like unlimited textures and lights and things. Or polygons for that matter. Whereas in film, you can kind of get away with it with having a lot more like high risk stuff. So like something for games, for an example, they might have like 4 or 5 texture maps, or it could be different, but it's a lower number. 4 or 5 texture maps or something that go into like a character that sort of represent like the color, how much things are going to like bump out from the surface, how metallic certain things are. And then in film, that same type of character might have like 25, 50 maps, because the texture budget is so much bigger. They can really afford the resources for that. And for film, you're going to have a lot of close-ups on stuff, especially lately, with everything being more and more high fidelity. So just some things to think about there. Talk about freelance and other industries. So outside of just film and games, of course, there are freelance artists. And sometimes they're just modelers. If you're really good, you can just be a modeler forever. But a couple things I just want to no one ever told me about any of this stuff when I was in school. I went to school for like 7 years learning 3D and learning modeling is, specific. And no one ever talked about like retirement or healthcare or anything like that. And I know that's not specifically has anything to do with like making models, but it is something you should be thinking about because it's never too early to think about that stuff. So yeah, think about retirement, healthcare, equipment costs, software costs. These are all major factors, especially if you're a freelance artist. So this little graph that doesn't maybe read super well. This is you, the CG modeler. So these are things that go into being a CG modeler. Your skill set, how well you can self-market, and secondary skills, right? Like, are you fun to be around? That kind of stuff. And then from there, you're trying to get into all of these different industries. There's all kinds of different things that can absorb modeling as a skill set. So how do you get there? How do you get learned? Here's you're the egg. So an egg with a burning desire to learn 3D modeling. These days, I think there's 3 main ways that people kind of learn 3D modeling. And at least that I could think of in the 35 minutes before this presentation that I made these slides. And let me just go ahead and skip away. So I put on the job learning kind of over here in its own separate bubble, but basically, so there's online and in-person classes, tutorials and on-demand learning, and then free stuff like YouTube. On the job, there's no like direct link between you and on the job because you sort of have to get the skills, build up some skills first, and then you get into a job, you get into a position. And that's where like the curve of you learning really goes like this. At least it did for me. And I think for most people. So there's not, like I said, not a direct way to go from what's a computer to learning on the job, but getting in the door somewhere, that's the first step. And then you'll need to build your skills somewhat to do that, of course. But you will learn things at an accelerated rate once you actually start to work, because you'll be actually working with actual real professionals in a real pipeline. So it's different than watching somebody on YouTube tell you how they think that works. I have a real love and hate relationship with YouTube art gurus. I think that there's a disconnect there. We can get into it or not. Let's talk about online classes first. I'm talking about online classes from like a university or like a real specialized school, like some kind of an institution that's offering online classes. So they're usually more expensive because you're dealing with other people's time, usually the instructor and other people that are in there. They're sold through a larger organization, like I said. Online classes, they give limited exposure to a professional, allowing for feedback and input from a real person. So that can be super valuable. If you are signed up for a really expensive online class that gives you no exposure to somebody who can give you feedback on your work, you should get out of that class, because that is not worth it. But they're also limited in other ways because they have a start and an end date. Many of them have live sessions, which only happen like at one specific time. So if you don't show up, you know that you miss it. If it's not recorded, which is sometimes the case, you just don't get access to that. So that kind of stinks. These are all good things to think about when you're signing up for a class. But like I said, they're usually taught by vetted professionals. They can be a good way to get exposure and ask questions if you take advantage of that. As someone who's taught a lot of online classes, it's surprising how many people sign up for them and pay their money and then never show up, or they never put in any effort, they never ask any questions. And I'm just begging people, like, please, please don't get ripped off. Like, ask me your questions and figure it out. But yeah, they're a great way to learn if you can afford the money and the time to devote to them. They're also just something you need to like keep in mind, I think. It's just like, what kind of a learner are you? What works best for you? So these three options maybe can help you sort of figure that out. In-person classes, they're cheaper generally, or they're expensive also. I mean, sorry, I was looking at another slide. They're expensive also. The main difference between in-person and online classes from an institution is that there's a physical location, so that may be an additional restriction for you. But usually in an in-person class, the equipment and software and stuff is provided for you. So that's something to consider. Let's talk about, that's really like the main differences, right? Let's talk about on-demand learning, which is probably one of the most popular ways to learn. The cheaper generally, because we're talking about like the Gumroad model. Now the dog wants in here. Gumroad model, or like Flipped Normals, or any of those kind of like tutorial sites where you can go and buy pre-recorded videos that someone has made about how to do something. Those are usually pretty good, but you have to be aware again, because there's so much of it now. There's so much of it, and you really have to like take a look at what you're getting. They're self-paced, which is great. That's a great benefit to these things. I would say the worst thing about on-demand learning is there's just zero quality control. So you can be, I've definitely paid for videos and stuff. I love to buy these types of videos and watch how people work. It's just informative to me. And like I said, I'm kind of a nerd for that stuff. So, but there's been a lot of them that are real disappointing. Like they just don't show you anything. And I feel like now that I've kind of had the experience of working for a while, it's maybe easier for me to find that stuff or to point it out than someone who just has like no idea what they might be looking for. So it's something to think about for sure. Yeah, and then the onus is on you to figure out what you need. So yeah, think about like, how do you learn best? And then kind of go from there. If you're the type of person that can self-motivate really well, and you kind of can figure out what the next block in your learning is, then these are a good way to go. The last point I have on there is the tutorial spiral. Now the dog wants out. Is what kind of happens is people get sort of like addicted to these, and they get drawn into them, and they'll follow a tutorial and they'll build the stuff from it. And then when they're done, they just buy another one, and they just keep doing that. And they never actually make anything that's unique or interesting to them. And they're not actually solving problems. Like you get better, just like working out, you get better when something kind of like breaks and you have to fix it. So I'm not that I've ever worked out, but like I think that's like the theory, right? Is that you break the muscle down and then it rebuilds stronger. And that's kind of how it is with modeling too. So you have to make mistakes and then fix them. So let's talk about the last sort of point of learning that I have on here, which is YouTube, which is like, and streaming, I guess, like watching Twitch channels and stuff like that. So again, those are free. That's a great benefit. Again, oversaturation of content. There's so much of this stuff out there. It's kind of hard to decide what to watch and what you're hoping to get from it. And again, just zero quality control. So things to keep in mind there. I love putting YouTube videos on and stuff while I'm working, because it kind of makes me feel like I've got friends and they're hanging out with me and we're all working. And but sometimes the information is just like bad. Sometimes just bad information. And then you look at the people who are telling you this information, they've never worked. So that's consider your sources, take what's valuable from them, But don't just take everything at face value, especially if you found it on YouTube. And then the last thing here is building your own tools. So those are like, you can learn the tools, you can get the training. There are ways to do this for dirt cheap or free. But there's the other things that can enhance that, and that's building your own tools, what I'm talking about here. So modeling and sculpting, drawing is like a very similar skill to that. I highly, highly recommend if you're going into any kind of art, even if you never do art ever, drawing is fun. So drawing is a good thing to do. But that is a skill that builds up modeling, and then modeling in turn feeds into drawing, and it creates a loop, and you get better at both the more that you do. Improving yourself, your mental health, and any kind of supplementary skills like knowing how other departments work. I think being curious and being inquisitive about stuff really goes a long way. And then learning and teaching, that's something that you can start at any point, I think, but like talking about what you're doing with other people and checking your own knowledge is a great way to keep building that skill. So these are all like tools that all kind of help feed into each other, and something that you want to keep doing forever and ever and ever. And let's just look at this one. This is cool. So this is kind of like a nice example. In the Arcane Netflix show, they did a really cool kind of thing where they really tried to make everything look like concept art, basically. So they, uh-oh, now if I go back, is it going to ruin it? All right, so they would like paint in a lot of like the shading and stuff on here. And like you can see like in the face there, a lot of the stuff is like painted in on the default model. All the lighting, I think, in Arcane was done in post, so it wasn't like a live thing. But this is like a great example of marrying the sort of design philosophies with the actual technical building of something. So, underneath we have just basic model, but on top, you can see it's just so much more than that. I thought that was a cool model. That was a fun show. Become incredible. Do you want to be a modeler? What will it take to get there? There's the egg. That's you again. So it's all about mindset, I think. Do any of these things kind of resonate with you? I don't know why I built these in slow. Do you like to build things? Do you like problem solving? Do you like to embrace challenges? Do you like to put in the time and the effort? Because a lot of it's going to be on you. And if you like to learn and help others, then these are all kinds of like clues that maybe this is something that you would enjoy doing. And there's just so many different ways to get into it, and there's so many different ways to learn. So yeah, go ahead and get started. Get some software, access to the software. Most 3D apps have student versions. Blender, probably everyone on the planet has heard of Blender at this point. It's free and it's very good, so there's no excuse not to do it. I work in a Maya and ZBrush pipeline, which means that everything ends up in ZBrush at the end, but Blender's my number one tool because it's just the most fun to use for me, which makes a huge difference after you've been doing this for a couple of years. So yeah, start learning and never stop learning. Tons of free resources, like I said. If you need to get started, if you have questions, you can email me. I'll be sitting there refreshing my email for several weeks after this, just to hopefully hear from somebody. Nobody ever does this. I'll just say that. No one ever does this, ever. I teach a class, and every week I say, email me if you have problems, and then they never do. And then every Q&A that I have, well, I had some problems with this stuff and it didn't work. So, reach out to people. And yeah, so that's my PowerPoint presentation. I wish I had more cool slides for stuff, but if you want it, we could talk about it. I don't know how much time we have left, but if you have any questions or anything else I can clarify, please ask.
That was such a great presentation, Dylan. Thank you so much.
Yes.
That was so in-depth. And I feel like I learned a lot about what it takes to be a modeler. So thank you for that. We do have quite a few Q&As that I think would be helpful to answer live.
Okay.
All right, so if we can dive into them. An anonymous attendee asked, what do you look for when reviewing a character modeler portfolio? What makes a portfolio stand out?
It's got to be, anytime anyone's looking at your portfolio, they're gauging your work against what they're already doing. So if you are applying at a place, make sure that your work reflects the stuff that they're already doing. They want to see if you can hit the ground running, at least to some degree. So it's got to like look like the stuff that they're already doing, and also they're going to be checking to see if you actually know what you're doing. I talked about the difference between modeling and sculpting early on. There's a lot of people that learn how to sculpt because it's kind of like more immediate gratification kind of, and it's more fun in a lot of ways than building stuff up polygon by polygon, but you got to have both skills kind of. And so if you can't show that you know how to actually construct a mesh, you may have the best sculpts ever, but if I don't know that you can actually work in a pipeline and do the job that I'm hiring you for, then I might have to skip over, you know. So those are the kinds of things. So yeah, just make sure that your portfolio reflects exactly the type of position that you're going for. If you don't know, you should ask.
Perfect. And then also speaking of those skills, another attendee asked, do studios want modelers that can draw? I don't know how to draw well. Will that reduce my recruitability?
No, I don't think so. There's lots of people who are incredible modelers that cannot draw at all, and lots of people like me that can kind of do both. I think that drawing is a skill that helps a lot. Like I kind of tried to harp on there, but it's not essential. And no one's going to go like, "Oh, great models, but can you also draw as well as everyone in the concept art department?" Probably not. So, you know, it's
That's
helpful,
reassuring.
but
All right. Are there any exercises or practices that you'd recommend aspiring character modelers do, like head speed sculpts or sculpting facial expressions?
oh, that's a really good question because speed sculpts are cool, but they're useless unless they have a point. So I would say anything that you're doing needs to have some kind of a goal at the end of it. So don't just like I don't know if anyone here's old enough to remember, but back when like conceptart.org was a huge thing, they would do these threads where people were just like, I'm drawing for like 24 hours a day, and they're just doing all this stuff, but they would never really get anywhere with it. Like, yeah, you get technically better at doing things, but they didn't have like an end goal in mind. So at the end of doing these like hours and hours and hours of work, they had nothing that they could put in a portfolio or anything like that. So always have like a goal in mind, I guess. So for me, when I'm practicing now, I say I want to get better at hair, or I want to get better at a certain thing, and then I make that the priority of whatever I'm working on. If that
Love
makes
that.
sense.
Yeah, always have a goal in mind.
Yeah, something
All right,
that you can measure.
perfect. What is the biggest skill difference that might set apart a junior character modeler from a senior one?
Um, hmm. I think a lot of it is, you know, it might be different in games, but at least in film, like in animation for film, the stuff that would set those people apart was a lot of um, that know-how, that knowledge, that vernacular for design, and sort of being able to interpret concept art in a way that fit like the aesthetics of the studio. So a lot of it is like knowing how to approach a model, of course, but even like I know a lot of like beginner modelers who have kind of the same skill set as like a more advanced modeler, but the only difference is like the more advanced modeler is just thinking about things differently. They just have like a design sense, and they have that experience of like knowing how things are going to turn in 3D. And so a lot of it is just that, just separating that. That's why I always encourage drawing and learning some of those other sort of secondary skills. I think that's a big one. For games, it's probably different, but I don't know. I haven't worked in games.
Awesome. I think there was a similar related question. Let's see. All right, well, here's another one from
All right.
Ryan, who asks, when choosing concept arts, is it better to choose something with a whole scene, such as a background environment, or just the character with a plain background? Which one is preferred for a character modeler portfolio?
So again, that's kind of like what's your end goal. If you're going for character modeling, then and I'm looking at your portfolio, I don't really care if your environments are good. Like it's nice, but I'm not going to be judging if you can be a character modeler based on your environments. So, you know, you can also make more than one portfolio. You can make a character portfolio and an environment portfolio. And if you're just doing art for yourself, or you're just trying to make a cool scene, why not do both? Um, but if it's just specifically for jobs, always try to tailor your portfolio towards only what you're going to be doing. Don't confuse the portfolio reviewers with other stuff, like, throwing in all of your like cool texturing stuff that you can do. It might be great. It might be great work, but it doesn't necessarily help you get that position. So yeah, I think it's just kind of, whatever your end goal is, think about that.
Perfect. Speaking of, say someone wants to focus their efforts on becoming a 3D character artist, Javier asked, how diverse should my portfolio be as a 3D character artist? Should they be very different from one another, like a monster, a female hero, a little child? I guess how much variety should there be?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So stylistic variety is one thing. Like if my portfolio is all, let's say, fantastic, like next gen game stuff, and I'm trying to apply at Pixar, they might not really know what to do with me, even if I'm really good at what I'm doing, obviously. So that's like stylistic difference, right? We talked a little bit about like making your portfolio tailored towards whoever you're applying at, but within stylistic variety, there's also like variety of what you're making, right? So I think, honestly, I think one of the things that got me into the Disney talent development program was that I had a couple of character models, but I didn't have any animals. And I was just like, I bet nobody does animals. So I just went and like modeled a buffalo over, based on some Disney concept art, like over a weekend. And I really think that that was the difference between me making it in or not, because they could see, oh, you can do more than one type of thing. I was just talking to a student yesterday. I always end up having to make horses for some reason. I hate modeling horses, but they always end up like showing up for some reason. But knowing how to do that makes me, I guess, more valuable, because being able to do animals and, yeah, children or adults or monsters, those are all kind of like, there's different skills that go into all of those. So yeah, showing that you can do a wide variety, like a range, is really, really helpful.
Awesome.
So the answer is
Do you
yes.
think that there is a way to differentiate a portfolio that's modeling for animation versus VFX and games? Or is there like a common line that may exist that could work for all three of those areas?
I mean, fundamentally, they're all kind of going to have the same, you're all going to be using basically the same programs. So, I mean, a way to differentiate the portfolio, I think so, because they're going to have different requirements. Like in games, you're probably going to have to show your texture sheets. You're always going to have to show wireframes if you're doing modeling. For VFX stuff, I might be different. It might, you might have to show like how effects are when they're isolated versus how they show up in a shot. So there might, I think broadly, you want to be able to demonstrate that like how to build the stuff. So that kind of goes back to fitting in, like hitting the ground running. So I think, I'm not sure if I really answered that, but
No, I think it helped.
yeah, you want to try to make it apparent that like this is VFX, this is modeling.
Great. And I think a little bit of that in terms of having a difference of style, right? Also may come into play.
For sure.
Great. All right. Joshua asks, I'm a graduation student working on my animation skills, but no jobs continue. I have potential, but I don't know when to choose my skills and struggling to find a path towards something. Any tips along the lines of focus? Finding a focus, I guess.
That's a tough one. I think, because it's not like there's just like this collective oh, we need more character people or more environment people. And the industry right now is tough. It's there's a lot of studios that are scaling things back right now. There's a lot of people that aren't working. I mean, just to be frank, like this is happening right now. So it's a tough time. That's not exactly what your question is, but like finding something that you really enjoy doing, I think is always, of course, that's like the sort of like wishy washy way of saying, like follow your dreams and it'll happen, which to some degree I think is good advice, because you don't want to end up doing something that you hate just because you thought you could get a job doing it. But I mean, that's definitely something to consider is how are, what's broadly available and has like a better, because once you're in and you're working, it might be easier to go somewhere else, right? Once you kind of like built up some of that experience. So it's not a bad strategy, but I think that prioritizing what you really love to do and putting your time and effort into learning those things will elevate your work because it's going to be something you genuinely enjoy. And I think that, I want to hope that, that everyone can just find something that'll work if they really put in the effort and the passion. But it's tough. It's tough now.
I think your one slide during your presentation with the crazy, I don't even know if it was a robotic arm. If that
Yeah.
kind of stuff moves you, I think that's a sign on where to take your focus.
Yeah, I put that in there because whenever I see something like that, I just stop and look at it and I'm like, this looks really cool. I want to go make cool stuff now too. And then
All
I
right.
think later, like, oh, I wish I should get a paycheck too, probably.
Yeah. Well, we are right at time. Do you have 10 more minutes to keep answering questions? We still
Sure.
have a few to go through. Okay,
Yeah.
great. If anyone else has to take off, no worries. Thank you so much for joining.
Yeah.
Um, all right, we'll keep going with some questions. All right. Someone had asked, how many pieces in a character modeling portfolio should contain textures / look dev?
As many as you want, but I think it's not the focus if you're going for just character modeling. So again, know where you're applying. If it's a place where you're going to be responsible for both, then everything should probably have that. It's never a bad idea to include that stuff, but I just wouldn't focus on it too much. There's kind of like a balance between showing stuff that like fits exactly the parameters of the job that you're looking for, and also showing stuff that just looks cool because everyone wants to see stuff that looks cool, of course. And it does, increase your chances, I think, if your stuff has like a nice look to it. So there's a reason why whenever we go for like director approval in a production, we always try to like pretty up the stuff that we're doing a little bit, like put some color on there, and like change some of these materials a little bit. It's a subtle thing, but it really does make a huge difference. So if you have those skills and you can execute it in a way that doesn't like detract from the model, I think it's good to put it in there, but still show your wireframes and stuff.
Speaking of adding things that look especially cool to your portfolio, someone had asked, a lot of entry-level jobs or junior positions require a high standard of portfolio that seems much complex to complete. Do you have any tips on how to reach that standard?
Yeah, a lot of it is, especially for like games. Like if you work in feature animation, you probably have to know like 4 different programs to get something done. But if you work in games, it's like 12 easily. So
Wow.
yeah, it's just that the bands keep going higher and higher for this stuff, and everyone has to know how to do everything. So, I mean, how do you get there? If I was just starting now, I think just slowly, like just build up, get good at one thing and then start adding more and more stuff in. And that's how you get to that slide that I showed really early on where that person built that entire like scene for games. It was a real-time scene, like a village. And it's just building things up slowly and then adding in new skill sets. And so eventually you're doing all that stuff. But I think, I can't speak to every industry and every job, but reaching out to people, I think, is a good one too. Like still, like I would just, if another thing I would do if I was starting out and I'm just this way is I would just email people. I just bug people and ask them. Like you don't want to be annoying about it, but it's surprising how often people don't get asked. So, yeah, I think just reach out and then get those answers directly because I
Speaking
can't speak to everything.
Someone had asked, which term and class do you teach at CG Spectrum? And will you be available to take mentees online outside of CG Spectrum later this year? So someone
Oh
is
boy.
life by the horns here.
um, let's see. So yeah, I'm like a general modeling mentor. They call them mentors at CG Spectrum. And so basically what I do is I answer questions for people and it's completely random the way that they assign the mentors and stuff. I don't know if you can get a mentor that you request specifically or not. That would be a question for them, I guess. But yeah, it's I don't know about doing individual coaching or anything like that. I mean, you can always ask, I guess. I don't have a plan for that right now. I'm currently in the process of redoing my sculpting class, which will be, I'll probably put that out on Gumroad or something, later. So you can be assured that it's quality material.
Amazing. Okay. You talked about getting your start at Disney through the training program, right?
Yeah.
So someone, Kai had asked, how exactly did you get your foot in the door? Did you have connections? Did you just apply for the program? Was it in addition to your portfolio? Were you just discovered by your portfolio? How did that happen?
I just sent him a headshot. I just mailed in a headshot and they hired me the next week. No,
A sculpted headshot, a modeled?
no, just me. Um, no, it's so the talent development program at the time was Disney had just finished up Tangled and they had this really old pipeline. So I think very often people don't credit incredibly good luck and yeah, I'll just say incredibly good luck. And that was very good luck for me, definitely, because it was at a time where they were like shoving all these older ways of working out, including people, and kind of like trying to bring in new people. So like if you knew how to do blend shapes in Zebra or in Maya and you knew ZBrush at all, that was like a big boon to your chances. And so it was partially excellent timing on my part, which I can't take any credit for. And also just like I had the right skills to get in there at the time. And then once I did get in, I worked super hard to learn all that stuff. So let's see, let me read that again. How to get my foot in the door. So that's how I got in, was just kind of like good timing and having the right type of portfolio. Because, I mentioned I made like some animals to go on there. So I put a little bit of thought in to what I was doing, which I really think made all the difference. Did I have any connections? I knew people that worked at Disney, but they didn't, I guess I'll say no to that because they had nothing to do with the talent development program or anything like that. But yeah, it's just kind of mostly just luck on my part getting in there.
Got it. Did you have like a biggest takeaway from your time at Disney?
The best stuff I learned at Disney was like that design sense, I think. Like I knew how to make models and I knew how to draw stuff, but I didn't really know how to do that stuff until I started working on the job. That's why I had that separate bubble for on the job learning, because it really does make a huge difference. And so like just learning how to think about art, I think in a way that was more critical helped everything. And then like the modeling skills come because you're doing it all the time, but it's that mindset and the way that you think about what you're doing that really elevates your work, I think. So that was my biggest takeaway from that, was just like, how do I think about art in a meaningful way? It's a hard one to quantify. Like I can't show you an example of that really, but that was my biggest takeaway for sure, was just learning how to actually like make artwork.
Awesome. If you had to start your professional career from scratch, what would be your methodology to learn modeling or improve your personal career in general?
I would not go to school. I would I would do it on my own. But the thing that I need to do is, I know what kind of a learner I am, and doing it on my own in a vacuum wouldn't work for me. So I would have to do it, but I'd have to surround myself with other people that were also doing it. So whether that would be through like Discord communities or getting more involved on, I don't even know if forums are really a thing anymore necessarily, but like find some kind of culture or cult, just a group of people that are doing the same kind of thing as you, and you all dress the same. And then talk to them about it. But there's so many free resources. You can learn to get where I am, like skill wise and stuff, for free now, but you just have to know sort of where to go to do it. And so if you're the kind of person that can like figure out what the next step is, or at least put in some research to find out what that next step is, then I think you can do it without any kind of, like, you don't have to pay any money. School's expensive. But there's so many great free resources. I don't know if I answered that question. If start my career from scratch, what would be my methodology to learn modeling? So yeah, I would get the software and I would just spend tons and tons of time in it trying to build stuff. Again, always have like an end goal in mind. Build a whole scene or try to figure out like foliage or something. And then those little things build up together. And then yeah, just connecting with other people and checking to see if your work is good and checking their work. I think that's what I would do, ideally.
That's great advice. And I think it all goes back to what you said earlier too, is also understanding what kind of learner are you and what kind of environment do you thrive in?
Yeah, just one more note on that too.
Surrounding
The
yourself
school,
with that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, you have to really kind of know because I've definitely taken classes that I wasted money and time doing, and I see people do that every day. I always want to tell them like, stop doing that. Like, get your money back. Go do something else. Like, um, but I mean, I know a lot of people who are self-taught too that do what I do, and they're incredible. And they never spent like any money, but they just learn differently. Like I had to go to college because I just wasn't. There's no way I'd be here now if I didn't have that kind of like foundational. I needed to be in it, so it
Some
helps to
people
know.
especially need that structure too.
Yes, yeah, I did for sure.
All right. Let's see. Oh, here's a good question. You mentioned many studios scaling back recently. How do you think the advancement of AI specifically for 3D modeling will affect the industry in the coming years?
It's doesn't look great. I'll tell you that. It's a dark subject because that is advancing at such a fast rate, and you're thinking of like who does this appeal to the most? And it's the people that have to pay for animation. So that's never a good combination. It's scary, honestly. I think it sucks. I hate the AI stuff because it just takes everything that's fun about building things out. Even if it looks cool when it's done, but it's really hard to say because the rate of advancement, like remember a couple months ago when we saw some of those images and we were all like, this looks terrible. This is never going to go anywhere. And now you can type stuff in and it'll animate it for you. So it's not great. I hate that. I wish it would go away, but it's not going to go away. So we have to figure out some way to parse it. Many studios scaling back recently. Yeah, so the scaling back is not a result of AI necessarily. It's more other things. There's been a lot of strikes. Some studios haven't made as much money this year, so those things are natural. This kind of stuff happens. It goes up and down. But yeah, the AI thing is not helpful for sure. I don't like it. I don't have a
All right.
solution. Learn AI, I guess.
All right. Someone had asked, when you're looking at portfolio/resumes, does whether or not a person graduated from college matter?
No,
I would guess no. Yeah.
no,
Great.
I've never looked at anybody's like. I've never checked ever to see that. It just doesn't matter. Non-applicable.
Perfect. Do you think working remotely as a modeler for film is possible?
Yeah, I do it all the time. Several Disney movies were made entirely remote. Not Moana, but Wish was mostly remote. And what came before that? Strange World, that was a lot of remote stuff. So yeah, totally possible.
Great. How long does it usually take to make each render? I'm guessing that varies widely depending on what it is, but
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about, so there's a difference between like making a model and making a render. So render would be like taking what you've made and then making it look nice. So that can vary. But you mean like making a model. So like making a character model like to completion, it can take anywhere from like 2 weeks to longer. On some characters, things just click nicely and you bang it out real fast. So like the shortest amount of time I've ever spent on like an A level character was probably like 2 weeks. And the longest I've ever spent is probably like 3 months, honestly. Like
wow.
on Big Hero 6, we had I made Hero for that, the main character guy, but we were working on like his teeth forever. And so like the character designer would come in and we would move teeth and stuff around. and then we'd show it to the directors, and they'd be like, "You remember that GIF where they're moving the toilet back and forth?"
Mhm.
That would be happening, where they're like, "I don't know, let's see some other variations on that." And so we'd work on it some more. And eventually, the character designer came to me and was like, "If we ever have any more meetings about teeth, I don't want to go. Don't invite me to them. I don't want to be there anymore." So it can take a long time. It really just depends. But yeah, I would say anywhere between 2 weeks and 4 weeks on average is like a good amount of time for a character to get ready for animation.
Amazing. All right. Well, we are 15 minutes over. I don't want to extend any more of your time. Thank you so much, Dylan, for doing this.
Yeah, I hope it was helpful.
Yes, there are a couple more questions on here in terms of specific modeling and software tips, but I would recommend if you all are still here to contact Dylan directly at his email address provided. And Dylan, what was your email address so we could throw that into the chat for folks?
Yeah, you can, or I'll just put it in, type it in there. Hosts and panelists, is that it?
It should be.
I don't think I can send it to
Everyone.
everybody.
You,
I don't have an everyone option.
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
That's it. It was,
Yeah, it's just contact@dylanekren.com.
Perfect.
If I get even 3 emails, I'll be shocked.
Is that spelled right? Did I spell that right in the chat thing?
That's right.
All right, cool. Awesome.
Perfect. Dylan, thank you so much. Everyone, if you came in late, this recording will be put up on BRIC's YouTube page in a few days, so be sure to look out for that. I'm sure many more of your questions will be answered on the rewatch. Thank you, Dylan, again so much for participating in this. I've learned a lot personally, so I'm sure our audience has learned a lot about modeling as well. For those of you who are interested in learning more about the world of animation, the jobs that exist, the careers that exist, also across VFX and gaming as well, BRIC is hosting its annual BRIC Foundation Summit this March 15th and 16th, where we'll have lots of exciting panelists, workshops, demos, where you can dive even further into this world and learn more about the careers within. So be sure to check that out. That's 2024bricsummit.com. Or you can just go on the bricfoundation.org website to get more details. All right. Thank you so much, Dylan. Thank you so much, everyone, for sticking around and for spending your Tuesday with us. And we'll be sure to catch you on the next one.
Thanks for coming.
All right. Thanks, everyone.